What happens when a late-night host asks one simple question and a royal guest loses control on live television? In just 32 seconds, Prince Harry went from charming interview to complete meltdown, turning what should have been a friendly chat into the most shocking moment in talk show history. Seth Meyer sat behind his desk that night, ready for what he thought would be another great conversation. The audience was packed, the energy was high, and Prince Harry walked out to massive applause. Everyone expected the usual celebrity banter, some laughs, maybe a few stories about royal life, but what they got instead was something nobody could have predicted. Seth started off warm and welcoming. "So great to have you here tonight. Thanks for coming on the show." Harry smiled and waved to the crowd. "Thanks for having me, Seth. Happy to be here." The first few minutes went smoothly. They talked about Harry's recent projects, his life in California, the usual surface-level stuff. Seth was his typical self, funny, engaging, making sure his guest felt comfortable. The audience was eating it up, laughing at all the right moments. Then Seth shifted gears, like he always does, going a bit deeper into the conversation. "You've been pretty vocal lately about wanting privacy for your family, but you've also done interviews, documentaries, written a book. How do you balance those two things?" The question was fair. Journalists and viewers had been asking the same thing for months. Seth wasn't trying to trap anyone. He was just doing his job, asking what everyone was thinking. But Harry's face changed. The smile disappeared. His jaw tightened. "That's a pretty loaded question, Seth." Seth kept his cool, staying professional. "I don't think it's loaded. I'm genuinely curious how you see it. A lot of people wonder about that balance." "A lot of people," Harry repeated, his voice getting sharper. "Or just tabloids looking for clickbait?" The audience got quiet. You could feel the shift in the room. This wasn't playful back and forth anymore. This was tension. Seth tried to lighten things. "No, I mean regular people, viewers. They're curious about your perspective." "My perspective," Harry said, leaning forward, "is that I can tell my own story without being harassed. Is that clear enough for you?" Seth's eyebrows raised slightly. He wasn't expecting this level of hostility. "Of course. I'm not trying to harass you. I'm just asking a question that's part of the public conversation." "The public conversation," Harry scoffed. "You mean the conversation that people like you keep pushing?" Now Seth's expression shifted too. He wasn't angry, but he wasn't backing down either. "People like me, I'm a talk show host. I ask questions. That's literally what I do." "You ask invasive questions," Harry shot back. "You pretend to be friendly, but you're just like the rest of them." The audience was dead silent now. This was uncomfortable to watch. Seth's producers were probably freaking out in the control room. Seth took a breath, trying to reset. "Look, I think we got off on the wrong foot here. I didn't mean any offense. Let's talk about something else." "No," Harry said firmly. "I want to address this. You think you can just ask whatever you want because you have cameras and an audience?" "That's not what I think," Seth replied, his voice steady. "I think I can ask reasonable questions in a respectful way." Which is what I did. "Respectful?" Harry's voice was rising now. "There's nothing respectful about questioning my choices about my own family." Seth shook his head. "I wasn't questioning your choices. I was asking you to explain your perspective. There's a difference." "Don't tell me there's a difference," Harry snapped. "I know what you were doing. I've dealt with people like you my entire life." The audience members were looking at each other, unsure what to do. Some were shifting in their seats. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was a genuine argument happening in front of hundreds of people. Seth remained calm, but his voice had an edge now. "I've been doing this show for years. I've interviewed thousands of people. I've never had anyone accuse me of being disrespectful for asking a straightforward question." "Maybe those people were too polite to call you out," Harry said. "Or maybe," Seth countered, "they understood that being on a talk show means having a conversation, and conversations include questions." Harry stood up suddenly. I don't need this. I don't need to sit here and be interrogated. You're not being interrogated, Seth said, staying seated, staying composed. You're being interviewed. That's what you agreed to when you came on the show. I agreed to a friendly chat, Harry said, his voice loud enough that everyone in the studio could hear clearly. Not an ambush. Seth finally showed some frustration. An ambush? Are you serious right now? I asked you one question about something you've talked about publicly before. The way you asked it, Harry insisted. The tone, the implication. There was no implication, Seth said firmly. You're reading something into this that isn't there. Harry pointed at Seth. Don't gaslight me. I know what I heard. The word gaslight made Seth pause. He looked genuinely taken aback. I'm not gaslighting you. I'm trying to have a normal conversation, and you're turning it into something it's not. I'm turning it into something? Harry's voice was incredulous. You're the one who came at me with that question. I asked you to explain your perspective, Seth repeated, speaking slowly now. That's not coming at you. That's called journalism. That's called conversation. It's called being nosy, Harry shot back. It's called crossing a line. Seth put his hands up. Okay, I'm sorry you feel that way. I genuinely didn't mean to upset you. Can we please just move on? But Harry was already pulling off his microphone. The small pack attached to his belt came off next. He dropped both on Seth's desk with a thud. I'm done, Harry announced. Seth looked at the microphone, then back at Harry. You're leaving? Yes, I'm leaving. I don't have to sit here and take this. Take what? Seth asked, his voice rising slightly for the first time. A question? You can't handle one question? I can handle questions, Harry said. I can't handle being disrespected in front of an audience. Nobody disrespected you, Seth said, standing now too. You came on my show, and I asked you a question that's been on people's minds. That's it. That's all that happened here. Harry shook his head. You don't get it. You'll never get it. Help me get it then, Seth said. Explain it to me instead of storming off. I don't owe you an explanation, Harry said. I don't owe you anything. Seth spread his arms. You're right. You don't. But you did agree to do this interview. And now you're walking out because I asked you one question you didn't like. One question that crossed a line, Harry corrected. What line? Seth's frustration was clear now. Tell me what line I crossed. Because from where I'm standing, I asked a perfectly normal question. Harry started walking toward the exit. This is exactly what I'm talking about. People like you never think you've done anything wrong. People like me, Seth repeated. You keep saying that. What does that mean? Talk show hosts? Americans? What? Harry spun around. People who think they're entitled to every detail of my life. I didn't ask for every detail, Seth said, his voice firm. I asked one question. One, and you're acting like I demanded your diary. It's the principle, Harry said. The principle of what? Seth asked. Having a conversation? Answering questions? Being a guest on a talk show? The audience was completely frozen. Nobody was clapping. Nobody was cheering. They were just watching this train wreck unfold. Harry pointed at the audience. They don't need to hear about my private life. Then why did you come on a talk show? Seth asked, exasperated. What did you think was going to happen here? I thought I'd be treated with respect, Harry said. You were treated with respect, Seth insisted. You're confusing respect with agreement. I don't have to agree with everything you do to respect you, and I don't have to avoid certain topics to be respectful. Harry's face was red now. You're impossible. I'm impossible? Seth looked genuinely shocked. You're the one who's losing it over a simple question. It wasn't simple, Harry said through gritted teeth. Yes, it was, Seth replied. You're making it complicated because you don't want to answer it. Harry took a step closer to the desk. You have no idea what it's like to have your every move scrutinized. You're right, I don't, Seth said. "But I'm not scrutinizing your every move. I asked you one question about something. You've chosen to make public." "Chosen," Harry repeated bitterly. "Like I had a choice." "You wrote a book," Seth said, his voice sharp now. "You did interviews. You made documentaries. Those were choices." "To tell my side of the story," Harry said. "Exactly," Seth agreed. "To tell your side. And I asked you to explain part of your side. How is that wrong?" Harry didn't have an answer for that. He just stood there, breathing hard, looking angry. Seth took a breath, trying one more time. "Look, we can end this now and part ways, or we can sit back down and have an actual conversation. Your choice." "My choice," Harry said quietly, but not in a calm way, in a dangerous way. "Everything comes back to my choices with you people." "What's that supposed to mean?" Seth asked. "It means I'm tired of defending myself," Harry said. "I'm tired of explaining. I'm tired of people like you acting innocent while you pick apart my life." "I'm not picking apart your life," Seth said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "I asked you one question. One. If you can't handle that, then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews at all." That was the breaking point. Harry's face went from red to almost purple. "How dare you tell me what I should or shouldn't do?" "I'm not telling you what to do," Seth said. "I'm pointing out that if one question sets you off like this, maybe this isn't the right venue for you." "This isn't the right venue because of you," Harry spat. "Because you can't help yourself. You have to push. You have to dig." "I didn't dig," Seth said loudly. "I asked a surface-level question that anyone could have asked." Harry grabbed his suit jacket from the back of the chair. "I'm leaving." "You already said that," Seth pointed out. "And now I'm actually doing it," Harry said, putting the jacket on. Seth sat back down in his chair, looking tired. "Fine. Leave. But for the record, you're walking out on a conversation, not an attack." "Call it whatever you want," Harry said, heading for the stage exit. Seth called after him. "You know this is going to be everywhere tomorrow, right?" Harry stopped, but didn't turn around. "Let it be everywhere. People will see how I was treated." "They'll see how you reacted," Seth said. "To one question." Harry turned his head slightly. "They'll see that I stood up for myself." "No," Seth said quietly, but clearly. "They'll see that you couldn't handle a basic interview." Harry's shoulders tensed. For a second, it looked like he might come back and continue the argument. But instead, he just walked off the stage, leaving Seth sitting alone at his desk. The audience didn't know what to do. A few people clapped nervously. Most just sat in stunned silence. Seth looked at the camera. Well, that was unexpected. He tried to smile, tried to lighten the mood, but it was clear this had rattled even him. The band started playing, trying to fill the awkward silence. Seth addressed the audience directly. "We're going to take a quick break. Not sure what's happening next, but we'll figure it out." The producers were scrambling. Camera operators didn't know where to point their cameras. The whole thing had fallen apart in minutes. Backstage, crew members were rushing around. Some were trying to convince Harry to come back. Others were just trying to stay out of the way. Harry wasn't listening to anyone. He was already asking for his car. "I'm not going back out there," he told one of the producers who approached him. "That man is insufferable." The producer, trying to keep things calm, said, "Maybe we can reset. Start fresh." "There's nothing to reset," Harry said firmly. "I'm done." "But the interview," the producer started. "Is over," Harry finished. "He ambushed me. I'm not playing along." Back on stage, Seth was talking to his crew during the commercial break. "Did I say something wrong? Was that question out of line?" His staff assured him it wasn't. They were as confused as he was. The question had been standard, normal, something any interviewer might ask. "He just snapped," one producer said. "I don't think you did anything wrong." Seth nodded, but still looked concerned. "This is going to be a thing, isn't it?" It already was a thing. People in the audience were texting friends. Social media was starting to light up. Someone had recorded part of it on their phone despite the no phone policy. The stage manager approached Seth. "He's not coming back." Seth looked up. "Seriously?" "He's leaving the building," the stage manager confirmed. Seth ran his hand through his hair. "Okay, so what do we do?" "We have to fill time," someone said. "We've got nothing for the rest of the show." Seth thought for a moment. "I'll talk to the audience. Explain what happened." When they came back from break, Seth addressed everyone watching. "So, as you just saw, Prince Harry decided to leave the interview. I asked him a question about balancing privacy with public projects, and he felt that was inappropriate. I respect his choice to leave, even if I don't fully understand it." He kept it professional, didn't trash Harry, didn't make it worse. But he also didn't apologize for asking the question. "We had other guests scheduled," Seth continued, "so let's bring them out and try to salvage the rest of the night." The show went on, but everyone knew that wasn't the story. The story was what had just happened. The story was a prince walking off a talk show set because he couldn't handle one question. In the dressing room, Harry was still fuming. "He had no right to ask me that," he said to his assistant. "It was a pretty standard question," the assistant said carefully. "Whose side are you on?" Harry snapped. "I'm not on anyone's side," the assistant replied. "I'm just saying, you've been asked that before." "Not like that," Harry insisted. "Not with that tone." But even as he said it, even as he tried to justify his reaction, part of him knew. He'd overreacted. Part of him knew that walking off looked bad, but his pride wouldn't let him admit it. His anger wouldn't let him see clearly. He'd come on the show expecting softball questions and easy laughs. When Seth asked something with even a hint of challenge, Harry couldn't handle it. He'd built up so much resentment toward media, toward questions, toward perceived slights, that he exploded at the slightest provocation. And Seth, who'd done nothing wrong, who'd simply asked a guest to explain their perspective, was left sitting at his desk, wondering what had just happened. The audience filed out talking about what they'd witnessed. People who'd come expecting a fun night of comedy and celebrity chat instead got a front row seat to a complete meltdown. Camera phones were out now, recording the empty stage, the abandoned chair where Harry had been sitting, the microphone still lying on Seth's desk. One audience member turned to another. "Did we really just see that?" "I think so," the other replied. "I'm still processing it." Seth wrapped up the show as best he could, bringing out his other scheduled guests, doing his monologue, trying to make the audience laugh after such an awkward moment. He succeeded mostly, but there was an underlying tension that never quite went away. When the show ended and the cameras stopped rolling, Seth sat at his desk for a moment alone. He replayed the conversation in his head, trying to figure out where it went wrong. But no matter how he analyzed it, he couldn't find his mistake. He'd been professional. He'd been respectful. He'd asked a fair question. And somehow that had been enough to trigger a complete breakdown from his guest. Outside the studio, Harry's car pulled away. Inside that car, Harry sat in silence, his anger slowly giving way to something else. Not quite regret, but maybe a creeping awareness that he'd mishandled the situation. His phone was already blowing up. His publicist, his friends, people asking what happened. He ignored them all. He wasn't ready to talk about it. Wasn't ready to face what he'd done. Because deep down, in a place he didn't want to look, Harry knew the truth. He'd made a fool of himself on live television. He'd confirmed every criticism people had about him being thin-skinned, unable to take criticism, demanding special treatment. And Seth Meyers, the man he'd just called insufferable and accused of ambushing him, had done nothing but his job. Had asked one question, a reasonable question, and maintained his composure even when his guest lost all composure. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. One man had handled himself with professionalism and grace under pressure. The other had thrown what could only be described as a tantrum. But Harry wasn't ready to admit that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. So he sat in his car, jaw clenched, telling himself he'd been right to walk out. Telling himself Seth had crossed a line. Telling himself whatever he needed to, here to avoid confronting the reality of what had just happened. Meanwhile, back in the studio, crew members were already talking about the incident. It would become legendary the night a prince stormed off the show. Some would sympathize with Harry. Most would wonder what he'd been thinking. Seth gathered his team after the taping. Well, that was something. Everyone laughed nervously, the tension finally breaking. "You handled it perfectly," his head writer said. "Seriously, you kept your cool the whole time." Seth shrugged. "What else could I do? Yell back? That's not my style." "A lot of hosts would have," someone pointed out. "Yeah, well," Seth said, "I'm not trying to make things worse. I just wanted to have a conversation." And that was the difference. Seth had wanted a conversation. Harry had wanted validation, agreement, compliance. When he didn't get those things, when he encountered even the mildest pushback, he couldn't handle it. The crew started packing up, people heading home after a very strange night. Seth stayed behind for a bit, doing press interviews about what had happened. He remained diplomatic, saying he hoped Harry was okay, that maybe they'd both misunderstood each other. But anyone watching the interview footage could see the truth. There was no mutual misunderstanding. There was one person asking a question and another person having a complete breakdown in response. The footage would spread everywhere. People would analyze every word, every expression, every moment of the exchange. Teams would form. People would take sides. But the facts were clear and undeniable. A talk show host had asked his guest a reasonable question. That guest had responded with hostility, accusations, and ultimately by storming off set. The host had remained calm, professional, and tried repeatedly to de-escalate. The guest had refused every attempt at resolution. In any other context, this would be called what it was: one person behaving reasonably and another person behaving unreasonably. But because of who the people involved were, it would become something bigger, more complicated, more debated. Still, for anyone watching without bias, without agenda, the truth was obvious. Seth Meyer had done his job. Prince Harry had lost control. One man had shown maturity and professionalism. The other had shown entitlement and an inability to handle even the gentlest challenge. The empty stage sat dark now, the audience long gone, the moment already passing into history. But what had happened there would be remembered, discussed, analyzed for a long time to come. Because in 32 seconds, a simple question had revealed everything. It had shown the difference between someone who understood their role and someone who expected the world to bend to their will. Between someone who could handle pressure and someone who crumbled at the first sign of it. The cameras had captured it all. Every word, every expression, every moment of the escalation and eventual walkout. There was no ambiguity, no mystery, just a clear, undeniable record of exactly what had happened. And what had happened was this. A prince had come on a talk show expecting to be treated like royalty, asking only questions he approved of, facing only topics he felt comfortable with. And when a professional interviewer had dared to ask something slightly challenging, that prince had revealed his true character. Not through violence or obvious cruelty, but through pettiness, through entitlement, through an inability to engage in normal conversation without feeling attacked. Seth Meyer had emerged from the encounter with his reputation intact, even enhanced. He'd shown grace under fire, patience in the face of unreasonable hostility, professionalism when his guest had abandoned all pretense of it. Prince Harry had revealed himself to be exactly what his critics had always claimed: unable to handle criticism, demanding special treatment, quick to play the victim, and ultimately unable or unwilling to engage with the world on anything other than his own terms. The stage sat empty. The lights were off. The audience had gone home. But the damage was done. The moment was captured, and the truth was clear for anyone willing to see it.